From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports. This is the Business of Esports Podcast. I am Paul the Prophet Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, the Honorable Judge Jimmy Baratta. For those of you who are new here, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Thank you for all the love, the 5-star ratings and reviews. If you haven't yet, go leave a review on the podcast. We read all of them. It means a lot to us when you leave a review. It helps others to find the podcast. But at the very least, share the podcast with a friend, a family member, a coworker, maybe someone else in the industry or someone else interested in the industry. I think a lot of people find the podcast as a great primer. Jimmy, how you doing this week?
I can't believe it's already here, Paul. Happy podcast day to yourself and to all of our listeners. It's just like, how are we doing this every single week and so much time, in between, yet it doesn't feel that way. I think it's because of, you overseas in Dubai, we got calls in Norway and in Spain this week and a few other cool countries. Our guest is in Montreal. Time is an illusion. Everyone's just always awake. We're always doing things. I can't make heads or tails of it.
I will say well, I don't know if it's a downside. I actually can argue it's an upside, but the one interesting part about being in Dubai is when my traditional 9 to 5 day is finishing, like you guys are on the East Coast and West Coast are basically just waking up. On the East Coast, just waking up. You probably haven't even got up yet. And I think it's interesting because, it on one hand, it provides for a lot of time to just get stuff done. Without messages and phone calls and things like that. On the other hand, it's like 5-6 o'clock rolls around and I'm like, oh man, day's just starting now.
For our listeners, if anyone wants to know what it's like to work for the prophet, you may think that when it's 3 a.m. his time, that's when he's asleep and you can, do whatever. But that's actually when you get the most messages and the most work. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, the time shift.
You know what else was interesting, Jimmy? I saw this week. I saw ads on TV for Gamers 8. This is the big gaming festival that's going to be happening in Saudi Arabia, and I'm. It's weird. It's unusual, I think, because you rarely see TV ads. I'm trying to think if I've ever seen TV ads in the U.S., for example, for a major tournament, like for example, Call of Duty coming to New York City, right? Like I wasn't seeing ads on TV being like, buy tickets now, with footage from the event. Linear TV is not a channel that I've seen used much in the gaming industry to advertise an event, especially an event. So I thought it was interesting. It was an interesting ad to see on TV. Of course, you see all the usual here, ads for mobile games, which I think is becoming more prevalent in the US, but it was interesting to see an ad for a live event.
I think I saw one for Spotify because Spotify is a partner of Gamers 8 as well. And I think I saw one of those. It is remarkable. We've seen some recently with the Live Golf tournament, but for video gaming, it's a whole new thing. And I think awesome indicator of the trends in the times to come.
Well, what's amazing is our guest may actually have an opinion or want to chime in on this. We have none other, as always, an amazing guest on the podcast this week. We have none other than Felix LaHaye, who is the founder of United Esports. He's going to talk about United Esports, but it's one of the leading esports and gaming marketing agencies in the world. Felix, welcome to the Business of Esports Podcast.
Hey guys, how are you? Thank you for having me.
Felix, for our listeners who maybe don't know about you, don't know about United, would love for you to give them a bit of your background, how you got into gaming, why you got into gaming, what you guys are focused on at United. Would love a little bit of the backstory.
Sounds good. The quick background of the company: we're a multifaceted esports media organization. We have three verticals to what we do. The most well-known one, as you mentioned, is the esports marketing one. We have a very strong market position with that. I'm very proud of the team and how much we do. So I will always say, of course, we're the best at esports marketing and the number one at everything we do.
I wouldn't expect otherwise, Felix.
Yeah,
It'd be
please,
weird
thank
if you
you.
were like, it would be weird if you came on and were like, hey, we're kind of third best.
Yeah, So and sorry for the moving on the camera. I'm laying funny because I broke my foot this weekend, so I have to have the laptop on my lap, which you're not supposed to do. All this to say, so okay, United Esports. So we have three things. We have the esports marketing. We have the esports bars. So we are in ownership of Meltdown now, Kappa Meltdown in Europe, and then full owners of Core Meltdown in um, North America. If you know, of course, Kappa Meltdown is actually the world market leader in esports bars. We have 30 esports bars. And then third is United Esports Ventures, which is our investment arm, where we invest in a few companies all in competitive esports. Two of the most well-known of those are Talon Esports out of Hong Kong and Beast Coast out of New York. So the goal when we build the company was to have a B2B arm. I come from marketing. I can give a welcome. My last company was a marketing company. So we started to have a lot of success immediately with the esports marketing side. So a B2B side, a B2C side with the esports bars, and a finance side, venture side with United Esports Ventures. So that's the quick background of the company. Myself, I'm from Montreal, but I've been in America for 15 years, living in LA. The last company I started my career as a musician. I used to be able to grow a lot more hair and had much blonder hair back then, playing hard rock for a living as a young man. But then I think 11 years ago, 10 years ago, I created a company that essentially was the first influencer marketing company as we know it today. I think we bought the first paid for post on Instagram over 10 years ago and grew that to be a market leader back then globally, at least in the Western world, with 5 offices in different countries, doing amazing campaigns there. I left that company a few years ago to create United Esports for two reasons. One, because I think people say esports is the future. I think it's also the present. Esports is the present and the future. And two, I love esports, so I really wanted to get involved. I was a big StarCraft fan and player. It was actually up to last month. It was the last time I'd made Diamond in game was in StarCraft 2. And it took me 10 years and I made Diamond, actually made Legend in Hearthstone last month. So I'm not a noob anymore. My hiatus is over.
Very cool. And I'm curious, Felix, like what was the impetus to transition to gaming? Like what was that moment where you realized here's an opportunity I want to jump on, right? You were obviously a gamer, but what was that moment where you said this is something I want to pursue from a business perspective?
Yeah, to me, one of the key moments. I have a few friends that were professional, uh, um, traditional sport athletes, and I'm in my mid 30s, and I was talking with them, and they were saying, "Hey, we're having a hard time. I mean, some connecting with some of the younger players in the team because when the road, when we're wherever." Instead of wanting to go to the bars and clubs with us, they want to go home and play games, and I was like, well, crap. If the people that are professional athletes, superstars that are at that level now, it means that the market penetration is so great that the form of culture, at least in my generation, I played sports, I played rugby in university. I would lie to my teammates to say, I mean, I would go out sometimes too, like quite frequently, but I would frequently like say, oh, I can't go out today because I'm studying or doing X, Y, Z because I wanted to play Halo or StarCraft. But now, guys in professional teams will tell their teammates, I'm not going. So just the cultural shift, that was one of the key moments for me in cultural shift. So I thought about that then, and I thought I had the tool sets to launch something successful in gaming and esports. So I did.
Felix, I'm curious, let's start with the marketing agency side.
Sure.
What have you seen change over the last few years from an esports marketing standpoint? Maybe the kinds of brands who are involved, maybe the level of sophistication or education, and maybe some of the challenges. We had Arnold Herr on the podcast last week from Genji, who's the CEO of Genji, and he was saying he felt like maybe there was not maybe, he felt very strongly that there was, call it like an esports winter that was coming or was here, and that teams would have to figure out very clever ways of monetizing, and that a lot of them may struggle. And I'm curious from the agency side, from the marketing side, what are you seeing and what have you seen change over the last few years?
One of the main changes is truly a positioning change from the brand standpoint. When we started a few years ago, brands would say, why am I even talking to you? Esports is for kids in their mom's basements. And today, most of the people we talk to say, I heard about esports. I know that gaming is the the thing. I just don't know what to do. So that big shift. I mean, it seems little, but from everyone that has had an involvement in marketing and recruiting marketing clients knows it's an enormous difference. So now, from a marketing standpoint, esports and gaming is still in the experimental category. So media buyers, they tend to buy in a pretty interesting fashion, which is basically a spreadsheet with like six rows that say linear TV, now radio, OTT, OTO. Now, very modernly, they introduced influencers as a category. It was experimental then, and then there's experimental, and they say, let's say they're going to spend whatever $100 million. They're going to put that in all these categories. And now, of course, esports is still in that experimental category, but there is less reluctance to the first conversation. I think one of the points to your point is, and Jimmy and I chatted about that before a little bit. Most of us that started in the esports are now in gaming and esports, right? There is, for us, we're called United Esports. Candidly, 80% of what we do is gaming at this point. So esports winter, maybe so. I think our teams are most that we have a portion of ownership in are not in the U.S. market. So it's talent in Asia is growing very strongly. So it's a bit different. The question is whether or not there will be a gaming winter. I don't think so. Simply because although there will be overall advertising dollar reduction, they're still quite low in gaming for the size of the industry. The investment from brands and organization, except for a couple of exceptions, is sub a few points. I mean, there's very few brands that invest more than 5% of their budgets in gaming, if even 1%. And I'm talking about the mega brands. As such, I believe that the true natural growth and correction in investment to possible eyeballs, which is the positive driven, will outweigh the negative of a slight decrease or significant decrease in marketing budgets.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. I agree completely that I don't think there's a gaming winter coming, and there's an interesting distinction there. And much the same way, we called ourselves the business of esports, but probably 80 or 90% of what we talk about is general gaming. Sorry, Jimmy, go ahead.
No, I love it. And Felix, I absolutely want to get in a bit into some of your global, I think, brands and presence, but just a little bit longer on the marketing side of things. Because as Paul mentioned, similar perspective here, not just with regard to gaming as a whole, but specifically with marketing, because I know we've had a lot of discussions on the show with marketing in particular. And you've spoken to the difference, I think, of esports marketing and gaming marketing and what I think you expect to see. What about not just in terms of total ad spend or sponsorship spend, perhaps in those initiatives, but what about the difference between or any changes from influencer campaigns to other types of campaigns? What types of activations or marketing campaigns are successful for you guys with your esports marketing vertical? And how is that different from the influencer campaigns that you worked on 10 years ago? Can you speak a little bit more to the evolution of the specific activations and less so as to the industry as a whole?
Absolutely. I think that's a very interesting topic.
Me too.
Obviously, I'm like, hey. So I'm going to slightly change the answer to the question, because if I talk about influencer marketing 10, 11 years ago, there will never be another moment like that. I mean, we made a post 10 years ago on Instagram with someone with tons of followers, 50,000. Someone, and a brand would get 11,000 followers from it just in 1 second. All this, like the very beginning of influencer marketing, we were selling campaigns for $1,500. We're a very small company in our kitchen, etc. And clients would be getting results that today you get. I'm dead serious when I say this, with $200,000 campaigns at least. It was so, and it corrected. It corrected very quickly because it's simple. In the beginning, no one was using influencer marketing. I mean, we were doing campaigns a bit similarly to what I was mentioning about esports marketing. People's like, what, influencers? Like, I have heard the phrase, sorry, I'll answer the question in a second, but that's a funny story. I have heard the phrase, I don't believe in social media. Not I don't believe in influencers. I don't believe in social media, from CMOs and VPs of marketing at least 20 times. So those were the year. That's people that were not even buying Facebook ads, right? And when we started doing Instagram influencer marketing, it was, I think, 1.5 2 years at least before you could buy ads on Instagram. So anyways, there was that very unique moment in history, which was I like to call the YOLO years, where everything was complete chaos and the results were insane, but there was zero measurement back then, no tools, nothing. So we did campaigns that were killing it, and CMOs would say, yeah, okay, I liked it, but I don't know if it worked. So it was, so all this context to say, I will compare esports marketing to influencer marketing maybe 7 years ago, because the first few years were too chaotic. But you see a lot of trends that you saw in influencer marketing were kind of similar in esports marketing. And esports marketing, especially influencers, streamers in esports, mirrored a lot of the principles we had established in influencer marketing, with, however, a much shorter tail in the top tier 1 creators. So what I mean by this is, without getting too specific,
that's interesting, because I'd love to tease that out, Felix. Go ahead.
No, what I mean by this is that at the very top of, so that's the thing. Mathematically, a platform like Twitch, almost everyone you see that has 100, let's say, concurrent viewers is in the top 1% of viewership. I think, it might have changed a little bit. I might need to update my data, but a few months ago, it was like, if you have 100 CCVs, you're already in the top 1% of streamers. Mathematically, I'm not saying in the how it works, etc., but in the pure, whilst on Insta, it was much more linear. So you had a stronger a more efficient distribution of following, whereby if something didn't work with someone with 5 million followers. You could get a great value with someone with 50. Whilst here, when you talk about streamers, streaming is live. It takes many hours, a lot of involvement, etc. So the entry points of pricing to create a stream, even though you're already in the 1% with a few hundred CCVs, is not systematically worth it. And conversely, because there's such very few people at the very top, so within the one, and that's what's interesting, within the 1%, there's an exponential within that, within that 1%, where a few people, we all know who the biggest names are that are at the very top that drive the 10,000 plus CCVs or 20,000 plus CCVs. There's very, very few of them. So they're pricing what they require, and they make so much money. Sorry, I'll finish one thought. So their pricing from an influencer marketing standpoint is extremely inflated because supply for the mega viewership is limited. Furthermore, unlike influencer marketing back in the days on Insta, you make money just from streaming. If you post on Instagram and you don't have a brand sponsorship, you just made $0. You spent 2 days or an afternoon doing a photo shoot by the lake. It was great. You paid $100 to your friend to take the pictures. You spent 3 hours editing and made zero money. Whilst if you go on stream on Twitch and you have a couple thousand CCVs, or even more so in the example I was giving, you're a top, and you have 20,000 CCVs. Just by being present, you make money. So from a pure influencer marketing standpoint, there's kind of a interesting distribution of value in streaming that didn't exist in other platforms. The other platforms evolved having an inefficient distribution, and I don't know if we want to talk about influencer marketing in fashion, which it's completely different, but it's not driven by the same economic factors. Here you have that quote unquote inefficient pricing at the tail and at the front and tail end. That's actually quite fascinating from a pure marketing and economic standpoint.
Felix, I'm curious why. So, like, what I'm hearing is the measure of influence is more concentrated among streamers than it is the general Instagram influencer, right? Like that you have more concentration at the very, very top of the pyramid when it comes to streaming. And you made the point that therefore the pricing is somewhat inflated, right? Because supply is low. There's only, dozens of streamers that hit that 20,000 CCV number or 40,000 CCV, whatever the number is, right? Does that imply that ROI for influencer campaigns when it comes to streamers at the very top is not as strong because they can sort of price more aggressively?
On the mathematical average, yes. However, in the individual cases, sometimes less so. And what I mean by this is investing in a top streamer is like producing a record. And that's was my old job, and we still make a little. Actually, we're releasing a record here with United Esports with some of our own streamers. But what I mean by this is that your potential for extreme ROI is existent, whilst with a mid-tier streamer, it's not existent. But your potential, so the record industry works like this: 19 out of 20 records lose money. 1 in 20 makes enough money that it will cover all your losses for the 19 others and then some. So on average, my guess is that it's probably balanced because markets need to make a form of sense. But in the individual, you have to be willing to take a significant risk of of downside for a potential for extreme upside.
Sounds like NFTs.
or the venture industry, right? Which is interesting. I mean, that's basically the venture model.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's exactly what it is. And
Felix, I'm sorry.
yeah,
No, please.
No,
continue.
I don't want to. I can talk about this. I mean, my background's in economics. That's why I did my degrees in, etc. So I like to see it from that front. But I don't want to create a snooze fest on the distribution of pricing and streamer marketing.
I think this is what everyone's here to listen to, so I wouldn't worry about that. But since you're gonna kindly turn over the mic to me, I wanted to follow up on that because you had mentioned a difference also between influencer campaigns on a streaming platform like Twitch versus something like Instagram. And I'm curious what hesitance, what resistance, what education is needed with your own marketing campaigns when you speak to sponsors or when you speak to just anyone that you're trying to activate for that campaign, where you have to explain the significance of a live concurrent viewer, someone that's engaged in watching, versus something on social media where perhaps it's a passive experience. It counts a view after 3 seconds or so of watching a clip, but they're not fully engaged or present, as well as traditional perhaps TV advertising, where we're seeing millions of viewers, but it's a different metric altogether. So if you can explain also how we're evaluating the CCVs versus the other impressions and viewership metrics on other platforms.
Absolutely. So the five, the couple minutes explanation of all three is that the metrics on Twitch is one of the king metrics is, as you mentioned, is CCV, which means concurrent viewers. That's what I was referring to a bit earlier when I was talking about 100, is how many people are watching in a specific time. Most of the campaigns that we will actually activate will be with people who have between 1,000 to about 20,000 CCVs, just for scale. So what I'll come back to this. In Instagram, you're talking about impressions. Something showed up on your screen, you saw it, you might have seen it for 2 seconds, or you might have dissected the entire post and looked into it and engaged with it in a different way. But there is a much shorter time frame of engagement. On TV, you are served a 15 or 30-second video spot usually, and you may be in the kitchen making popcorn and it's playing in the back, or you may be engaging with it and watching it. And by TV, I mean linear TV. It's a bit different on other platforms. So the metrics, and it's kind of a reverse curve of engagement to the reverse curve of numbers. TV metrics are really good on many fronts. In the sense, if you're in a big channel, you will technically have, or at least historically, a lot of numbers. You take, especially in a big one like a sporting event, etc. An ad will come on top of it, except if it's a Super Bowl, your ad will probably come 42 times during the broadcast because that's what they do. So at the end of the broadcast, you will say, hey, there was 1 million impressions of that 30-second ads. You have no idea if people actually watched it, but that's technically true. An Instagram ad, you will see specific post impression. That is, that made our life much easier and the influencer's life much worse when that showed up, I think in 2015 or 16, because you used to only be able to know the number of followers. But now exactly 75,000 people saw this. So you see, they had to physically see it and be on the screen for X amount of. It's not long. Meta will never tell us exactly what it is. I think maybe our analytics teams knows it, but it's not very long. So it doesn't mean you liked it. It doesn't mean anything, but it means it showed up in your screen. You have to have a level of engagement with it. Then of course people can double tap and engage. And then the last is CCVs. And as we just mentioned, the numbers here are like 1 to 20,000 in most cases, which is lesser than the Instagram post. However, Twitch metrics say that people watch on average 27 minutes. So here, that these people are actively consuming that content and actively engage with the sponsor stream. So that's kind of the curves, right? On one end, you have something that's zero engagement potential, but technically large numbers. So a surface level commercial. And on the other end, you have something that's lesser number, but much deeper engagement, where you're literally talking about double digit minutes of people are watching, instead of something that could be playing in the back. And people don't generally watch the TV commercials anyways. Does that make sense?
Total sense,
Totally.
Felix. Um, and super insightful. I want to talk a little bit about though what you guys are doing on the venture front, because we alluded to it a couple minutes ago. Like, what is the thesis for United from a venture standpoint? What kind of opportunities are you looking for? How does it fit into the broader picture, if at all? Like, what is the thesis there?
Sure. So now I'm going to talk about something completely different. Uh, the thesis is, so the first round we just invested on things that we thought were cool in esports and gaming. We are IP people, we're media people. We thought that Meltdown, Talon, and Beast Coast had great IPs, so we invested in them, and we're very happy with those investments. The fund as it is now is focused on trend specific esports investment, with the thesis of bringing American and Western money into Asian esports. We're very proud and happy with our Talon esports investment, which is out of Hong Kong. And we are getting some help now with the government in Korea. So we are looking to do exactly this. There's a few reasons for that, which can be summarized as such. One, the valuations are quite interesting in Asian esports. Two, I believe that in North American markets, they are the only markets in which esports and traditional sports will be in comparable levels, which is, in my opinion, the lower end of esports. I think in Asian markets, esports are going to continue to grow linearly to be much, much bigger than traditional sports, and of course continue as such a cultural phenomenon. So the growth potential is excellent. And third, candidly, we are a smaller fund. We saw all the recent announcement with the high nine-figure funds that have been created for gaming. We're a smaller fund, and as such, we take pride in having a more precise thesis.
Interesting. But is when you're looking at things, are you trying to figure out how does this plug into, something we're doing on the agency side? How does it plug into something we're doing with Talon or with Meltdown? Like, does there have to, are you thinking of this holistically, or is it being managed truly like a separate venture fund that has its own economics? That like I'm curious, what was part of it? We want to sort of juice everything else we're doing at United with these investments, or is it this is just leveraging our expertise to do something on the side here?
It's a bit. It's a bit. It's a bit of both. The first round is incredibly connected to United Esports. So Meltdown, Talon, Beast Coast, it's incredibly connected. We talk every week. We collaborate on a lot. It's I wouldn't say it's vertically integrated, but it's a very strong matrix like that. When we're looking at the expanded thesis to continue to invest, it is connected primarily to United Esports marketing, because we have the expertise, media, etc. But it's slightly more separate than the first round.
Are there specific themes that you're focused on, or specific areas that you're wanting to see more deal flow in, you're wanting to see more opportunities in?
I like I like IP. I like my God, the word escapes me, and it's such a simple word. When there's buildings, infrastructure, I like IP. I like esports infrastructure, and of course, general esports tech. Now we've been pitched by a few gaming studios, minor gaming studios, so that's quite interesting. To me, the thesis is really about consolidating and having a presence in that Asian and Korean esports ecosystem. And I know it makes me a worse entrepreneur, but I'd like to invest and focus on things I understand very well. So I understand Web3 better than most people, but I don't think I'm at the top 0.5%. Whilst I think we have a good understanding of the other elements that we are focusing on gaming in general.
Felix, this might be somewhat of a vague question, but other than obviously these companies asking for money, what are the most common requests for help? You mentioned meeting with some of them weekly, right? Or obviously with some consistency. You don't just invest in companies. You either look for them to tie into something that you're doing, or like you said, you think they're cool and doing a good job. But other than them asking for money, what type of help, support, insight, services are they asking after the investment's been made? What are some of the most common, I think, hurdles, learning curves that you're seeing from startups that you're hoping to facilitate after a deal has been struck?
You know, I mean, the I would say monetization is the one thing that's the most common request. But candidly, the companies that we've invested in, I'm extremely happy not only from a financial standpoint, but the we have a very strong symbiotic relationship. We're all similar ages, doing cool stuff together, and I'm proud to say that they help us as much as we help them, and sometimes more. But if the one question that is most recurring is monetization, especially with companies with strong IP, is monetization of said IP.
Felix, I want to talk a little bit about Meltdown also. Is that one of the investments where Asia is a big market opportunity for you? Like, how are you looking at Meltdown? Right, Meltdown has a big presence in Europe, obviously, and so how are you looking at the growth there? And what is sort of the next 2 or 3 years for Meltdown look like? Is there a world where we see 5,000 esports bars, right, or gaming bars? Like, is that the vision, or is this more, let's pick our spots, niche, big cities, things like that? I'm curious what the longer term vision is there.
Yeah. Um, I think it's. I mean, I would be quite happy if we had 5,000 meltdowns. I'd be in a very good mood. Um, a lot of our bars do well in small cities. There is no, it's an interesting thing. So just to give a couple points for people that know a bit less, Meltdown was created in Paris 10 years ago. We now merged with our friends in Sweden, Kappa. So we had, basically together we now have 30 something locations, um, and we launched in North America, in the U.S., Core Meltdown, which is the North American version of the product. That's very similar with a couple differences. Is Core Meltdown also integrates in existing locations. So now Core Meltdown is at Hard Rock Cafe. There's esports presence, themes, events, parties, competitions at Hard Rock. They're all they're managed by the Core Meltdown team. So what I'm trying to say here, to answer your actual question, is that in Europe, we tend to do incredibly well in small cities. I don't think the market is at a position now where we can sustain, 3, 4 meltdowns per city, in the same way that, if you look at a big city, it will have several, uh, you know, being Canadian, several kegs or several Olive Gardens or several of the big chains yet, but we will evolve to a point to be the same. So right now, the map coverage is the number one priority. In Europe, we're expanding. So our main countries are Sweden, France, UK, expanding in Spain, Italy, Germany, etc. So really the goal there is to do very well in Europe. And then, of course, the core Meltdown brand and the Meltdown brand in general is not as well known here in America. So to extend that through not only our partnership with Hard Rock, but also with our own brick and mortars.
Do you see the demographics working in your favor when it comes to gaming bars? Like, is there? We've talked about this often, but it feels like the average gamer age, um, that the population of gamers, call it above 20 or 20 above 21, in the case of the US, is increasing because you have all these people that grew up with gaming and are now, gamers and have money to spend in their 20s and 30s. Do you see that those demographics are working in your favor? Like, what's driving the growth of of the meltdown locations? Like, I'm curious, what is the big driver?
Yeah, I think the demographics are working in our favors in two fashions. The one you just highlighted, simply everything demographics Baze works in gaming and esports favor, meltdown or no meltdown, simply out of people getting older. What candidly speaking, one of the biggest um, holdbacks for gaming is the fact that decision makers in a lot of industries are in their 40s, 50s, etc., and they didn't grow up with a gaming culture, so they still see gaming as a side culture. As people who are 27 today become 35, 40, and they become the top CEOs and CMOs and VPs in big organizations, simply through that, gaming grows exponentially and the revenue of gaming grows exponentially. So there's a similar concept, of course, in bars. People get older, they want to go to bars, and as you're saying, the sweet spot of this audience is now entering the demographic. There's a second a very positive demographic shift, which is how strong gaming culture is with younger women. Because in my generation, gaming is, I don't know the exact stats. I mean, the team has it somewhere, depending on communities, at minimum 75, not 85% male, right? Whilst it's absolutely not the case in Gen Z. And when you want to create a bar experience is always the most fun when you have diversity, you have a bunch of different people. So the aging of the audience becoming of bar age, with the fact that almost everyone now is involved in gaming culture, makes it very favorable for for gaming bars. So that's the thesis, and I think that's what will allow us to, and of course, I have a lot of love for what I call Gen 1 gamers, people in their mid 30s that, and Gen 0 gamers, which is the guys that played the Atari, etc. But I believe that what I call Gen 2 gamers, the generation under me, is actually a much better generation and has a much more intelligent approach to gaming culture.
So besides speaking towards growing the brand in physical locations, what are you noticing, or what are you guys doing successfully to increase engagement night in and night out? This is a space that you need to have live or certain events or something to attract this demographic that we were speaking of, women and men. What are you doing successfully, I think, from a day-to-day basis?
I mean, not to give a canned answer because I generally believe it, but most locations have almost every meltdown location has a local partner that's in ownership of the location, and as a result, a meltdown is not a rinse and repeat. Of course, there's similarity in the culture and the approach. There's a lot of network economics. There's a lot of economies of scale in running the business. It's very good for the licensees, franchisees, managers, etc. But if you go to the meltdown in a city like Dijon, which is a medium-sized city in France, it will be quite different from the one in London, and that's what contributes to making it successful, is that it caters to the local communities very closely. There's a few things that work everywhere, but for the one we had in Montreal for quite some time, the most popular night of the month was DDR, whilst in Paris it was Smash, and then in London I think they were, or Sheffield, I can't remember, that one of the best League of Legends tournaments. So by catering to its local audience, that's how they succeed. Because one thing that's important to keep in mind from a business standpoint, an esports bar is not a successful destination in the long run. It's successful as a pillar of the community. People are in the area, they walk by, they take the metro, they drive a few minutes, um, and they come to the location. People that are gamers, big esports fans, are going to come to your bar. Take the train for an hour to your bar once a year, twice a year if they really love you. You make a good business if people, come by every week. And as a result, what makes us strong is having strong local implementation.
Very insightful. And I think, I've talked on the podcast a little bit about, like, this was a more Web 2 a word, or something you heard in venture circles in early 2000s, but this idea of hyper local, and I love this idea
Yep.
of enabling local esports entrepreneurs, essentially, right, to have their own little esports business. I think is very cool, and an underserved segment of that market, right? There's a lot of people building very big flashy stadiums, but not many serving those local communities, and I think that's interesting. That brings us, guys, I just want to say, brings us to everyone's favorite new segment, and we're calling this Judge Jimmy's cross-examination. And the way it works, if you're new here, is Judge Jimmy's going to ask a few rapid-fire questions to get to know Felix a little bit better as a person, as a gamer. Judge Jimmy, take it away.
All right, Felix, just like Paul mentioned, just a handful of questions here for you. Nothing too difficult, so no worries here. First, what is your favorite video game of all time?
Halo 3.
Oh, no hesitation. That's a
I know,
strong
zero.
feeling. Yeah. Love it.
As a result, I'll admit my biggest shameful secret. I play FPSs exclusively on console. Although I've
Oh no! Oh no! This episode will never come out now. I can't.
Exactly.
I know the feeling, Felix. I started on console as well. Let's see. What is your go-to gamer snack or drink?
It tends to be an alcoholic beverage. I tend to play later in the evenings or on my day off, so it tends to be a beer.
As the owner of Gamer Bars, I would expect nothing less.
Yeah. Any brand in particular, or are you open?
Kind of what I have in the fridge, I'd say. I try to. I don't know. We have friends over sometimes, so whatever is left. But if I can have my choice, I'll pick something lighter. I'm trying to not, get completely terrible at the game right away in the first 30 minutes.
Awesome. So, I saved this question for you. I haven't asked many guests, but given our first lengthy discussion on marketing and social media, for you personally, what's your favorite social media platform of choice?
Well, for me to participate in, I think I get the most insightful content from LinkedIn. However, because it's closely related to my career, I think Twitch is the most interesting platform. However, from a consumer standpoint, when I'm trying to have fun, it's honestly I'm off social on many platforms that are not really. I'm no longer on IG. I kept my Twitter, of course, made different ones, but I think Twitch is the most interesting one, and has some of the most engaging content creators.
Love that answer. Last one for you, Felix. What's your favorite esports or video gaming collaboration that you've seen with a non-endemic brand?
Of course, there's a lot of the ones we did. So I'll tell you my favorite that we did, and I'd give you my favorite from someone that's not my favorite story from. I don't. I know it's a very biased opinion because we do a lot of that for a living. So I'm like, of course, our own is the best. My favorite thing we've done was and have been doing for the last three something years is Tampax in gaming, because when we're talking about demographics, we pitched Tampax 3 years ago, and many people, friends, advisors, etc., said, "Don't do Tampax in gaming; it's going to completely tank. The audience is super toxic, blah blah." And I was steadfast. I want to do it. It's going to be great, etc. And it was the highest performing campaign for the brand that year. It's been the highest performing campaign for the brand this year, and the positivity is enormous. So I spend a lot of my career and free time and talking about the fact that a lot of negative preconceptions about the gaming audience tends to be false. There is some toxicity, of course, a lot uncertain things, but if you do something that adds value to the audience, most toxicity is generated by something that's kind of senseless. Of course, there's trolls, etc. But if you do something cool, the audience likes it. And when you're doing something that people like, if a troll shows up, they tell them to, go pound send. So that to me is one of my favorite collaborations, and I will generally say to talk about people that are not our partners. One thing liked the most is when Bud Light entered gaming, because I thought it was pretty cool, but it also helped us shatter some of the myths around the age of the audience. Because
Yep.
before that, and I mean, I literally would go in conversations, say, guys, do you think that Bud Light's legal team didn't look into this? I said, okay, fine. So it opened a lot of doors.
Great insight, Felix. I appreciate it. That definitely ends our segment, and I just want to say what a great episode. Thanks for coming. I think we could have spent, Paul, the entire show on any one of these topics that we covered. So we're gonna have to have you back on. But I'll give you back to Paul, and I'll see you next time.
Felix, if you how would you love to be, if people want to find you, follow what you guys are doing at United? How do you like to be found, followed, etc.?
Yeah. So I mean, you'll realize I have no imagination whatsoever. My email is Felix at United Esports. So if you want to send me an email, you can send me an email. My Twitter is Felix LaHaye. So if you want to send me a tweet or hear the few thoughts I share here and then, that's where I am. And generally, if you're interested in knowing more, of course, working with the company in either of the side of the elements, you can email me directly about, of course, the marketing, about the ventures, about the bar side at Felix at United Esports, or a lot of the information is on the website, which is unitedesports.com.
Very difficult to remember. I definitely love what you guys are doing. I think everyone should be following and paying attention. Thank you so much, Felix, for being on the show. Jimmy, thank you as always. Just a couple of reminders for our audience, guys.
So
every Wednesday, we do a live stream, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. It's a new time. If you remember, we used to do it later in the evening. Now we're doing it in the middle of the day to serve a broader market. So make sure you show up for that. We cover all the news from the week with a bigger cast. It's a lot of fun. It's live. So that's Wednesday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. Also, make sure to follow Business of Esports everywhere you get our content, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube, on every single platform you can imagine. It's all Business of Esports or Biz Esports everywhere. We thank you guys for tuning in every week. Don't forget the most important thing, the future is fun. We'll see you guys next week.